That empowered me to get after it and learn everything I could, just as I would if my kid had type 1 diabetes. Would I be crying at home and feeding them chocolate and feeding me chocolate and hoping the world would get better? No, I would change everything. Well, that's what I learned to do. And it's not easy, but I learned to do that.
Welcome to the Honestly Adoption Podcast, a show about adoption, foster care, advocacy, and becoming the best caregiver possible. Pull up a chair. We're glad you've joined us. Here are your hosts, Mike and Kristen Berry.
Friends and family all over the world, welcome to you. Welcome to the Honestly Adoption Podcast. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. My name is Mike Berry. I, along with Kristen Berry, and most of the time our good friend Nicole Jurgis, are the hosts of this show. And man, this show is all about taking an honest, vulnerable, open, 363, obviously I'm not a mathematician, 360-degree perspective of the adoption journey. We talk about trauma, we talk about attachment building, we talk about the hard stuff, the messy stuff. We talk to professionals, adult adoptees, former foster youth, birth parents, adoptive parents, foster parents, man, all kinds of amazing human beings from all over Earth. And we are excited that you are joining us. This is season 27, episode 238. And we are right smack in the middle of a special series that we're doing called FASD Expert Spotlight. We've been featuring experts, thought leaders, fellow podcasters who are in the FASD community to really give hope and insight into fetal alcohol spectrum disorders. We've interviewed the world-renowned, we shared an interview with the world-renowned expert, Dr. Ira Chasnoff, very dear friend of ours. A couple of weeks ago, last week, Natalie Vecchione from FASD Hope and her amazing podcast. We shared an episode we did with her. And then today, we're excited to introduce to you another good friend of ours, Robbie Seale, from FASD Family Life podcast, and she's got she's doing some amazing work through her show, bringing hope and insight and education into fetal alcohol spectrum disorders. And this is an episode that we did with her earlier this year, that was all about, first of all, we talked about the Insight virtual conference, which is a conference we run every year, which is super amazing, and we had a great conference this past March. Unfortunately, you can't sign up for that anymore, but you're going to hear a lot about that on the show. We also talked about trauma. We talked about receiving a diagnosis for your child and what that means and how to navigate that. And bottom line, we just talked about finding resources and finding hope. And again, we're airing this episode, not so much about us, but about pointing you towards valuable resources. And the FASD Family Life podcast with Robbie Seale is one of those valuable resources. You can find out more about that by jumping over to the show notes and clicking the links and learning all about the amazing work she does. And so, guys, listen, we're going to get to that episode here in just a moment. But as I've been sharing with you the last couple of weeks, dads, foster adoptive dads, as you know, you've probably heard us talk about this. Road Trip 2022 is coming up this fall, this October in the mountains of Colorado. You can learn more about that by jumping over to roadtripdads.com. And right now, when you sign up for Road Trip, we're giving you some exclusive bonus content. We've never done this before with Road Trip, but if you sign up, we're sending you free access to Trauma Knowledge Masterclass, our premier course on understanding trauma, disrupted attachment, behavior response and management. We're also giving you 1 year free membership to Oasis Community, which is our virtual support site for foster and adoptive parents, as well as autographed copies of our book, Securely Attached. Guys, we've never done this before. We've never given away bonuses, and we're excited to do that this year for the very first time. So dads, sign up. If you are a dad, jump over to roadtripdads.com, grab your spot to Road Trip. If you know a dad, if you're married to a dad, if you live next door to a foster adoptive dad, sign him up. We've never had anybody regret going up the mountain with us for Road Trip. So sign them up, guys. Listen, and if you're like, what in the world is Road Trip? Road Trip is an experience created by foster adoptive dads for foster adoptive dads. We spend 3 days in the mountains connecting with each other, supporting one another, having open and vulnerable and honest conversations with one another. Plus, we're in the mountains. We're 9,100 feet above sea level. We're at a beautiful ranch surrounded by the most beautiful scenery you'll ever see. We go fly fishing. We take trips to microbreweries. We go hiking. We take naps. It's all part of Road Trip, you guys. roadtripdads.com. You won't be sorry. You need to sign up. Time is ticking. We're less than 2 months away, and the deadline to register to get those bonuses is September 1st. So don't miss your shot. Man, I hope to see you guys in the mountains of Colorado. Okay, enough of that. It's going to be awesome. You want to be there. Let's get on with this amazing interview that we got to do with our good friend, Robbie Seale. Here we go.
Welcome to FASD Family Life. This is the podcast for families by families where we get real about raising children and youth with fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. I am your host, Robbie Seale, FASD educator, advocate, and mom of 4 children with FASD. I know the struggle is real, but so is success. I am really excited to be recording an episode today with Mike and Kristen Berry of Honestly Adoption. We're going to have a great conversation about getting real about raising children and youth in adoption with histories of trauma, attachment disruptions, and fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. So I invite you to grab your cup of coffee with me and let's chat parent to parent. Some very special guests with me today, 2 adoptive parents, just living the dream just like I am. And I'm going to throw it over to them to introduce themselves.
All right, I'll introduce us. I am Mike Berry, and this is Kristen Berry. Although I'm looking at a screen, nobody else can see the screen, but I can see the screen. This is Kristen Berry, and we are the Berries. We are parents of 8 children, all through adoption. We are the co-founders, co-CEOs of the Honestly Adoption Company, which is based in Indianapolis, but has people all over the world, both working for us and part of our audience. And we specialize in providing parent-to-parent support and transformational resources that help caregivers become the best caregiver possible. Gosh, I don't know what else there's all kinds of things. We live on a farm in the middle of Indiana where it's flat, but it's beautiful. But we're both we're city dwellers and country dwellers. So we're weirdos like that. And that's really, I guess, a good thing, because if our kids are having meltdowns, we just send them out the door to scream at the corn. Corn doesn't mind. So anything else, Kristen? Did I get it all? Did I
That's pretty much it.
Check all the boxes?
I don't know. Did you say we're grandparents?
Yes, been a fun grandparents. That's
thing.
Right.
We're grandparents to 4, which is just a lot of fun also. Our kids range from 35 down to almost 13. And then actually our grandkids are 8 all the way down to 2.
I can imagine all the fun it is when they all kind of get together. I mean, I know it's not always fun. We have a particular kind of fun in our lives.
Right.
But I imagine it's kind of fun when, these young aunties and uncles get to play with their nieces and nephews. I think that's probably pretty cool.
Yes, I think that's been one of the most exciting things about being grandparents in such a large family is watching our younger kids just be really the most incredible uncles.
Isn't that amazing? Yeah. Isn't that amazing? That tenderness that we don't often get to see, but they demonstrate that with their little nieces and nephews. Hey guys, sounds like you built your family through adoption. Can you tell me about the intent behind that and what you've learned from that?
Yeah, well, I can tell you this, that it's the most beautiful storyline that more beautiful than anything we could have created outside of adoption. But this is not something that I grew up with in my own family growing up. So adoption wasn't a storyline in my family growing up, but it was a storyline in Kristen's family. And when we got married 20 plus years ago, I'll just leave it at that, 20 plus years ago, Kristen said, she brought up the idea of adoption. And at first I was resistant, not because I was against it, but because I just didn't understand it. It just wasn't something I was used to. Plus, as most people could understand, there were kids in foster care in my elementary school, right? And they often had behavioral problems. And so, or I would see some, really off base headline or storyline in a television show or a movie, just kind of tainted the idea of foster care and adoption. fortunately, my heart was open to that. And, we began the journey in 2002 with a private adoption, who she is now our almost 20-year-old, that's crazy right there. Like, wow, that's just 20 years like that. Right. But then soon after that, we entered into the foster care system, 2004 to 2012. And that's where a lot of hardships came from, because that's when we really encountered children who had a trauma history. And, it's been hard. It really has. I mean, we talk very openly about the hardships through our platform at Honestly Adoption, but there's a lot of hope in that, right? And that's why we work so hard to bring hope to parents, to let them know, yeah, this is hard, but there's a lot of hope, right? You have to, when you can understand where behaviors come from, reframe your perspective by understanding trauma, then you can change your response. And instead of responding harshly or with contempt, you start to respond with compassion. And that's what builds attachment. Right. That's what changes the journey for you. And that's really how we have, made it more than 2 decades doing this and still going strong, because of that change in perspective. That one change has been a game changer for us.
I completely agree with our kids are having a hard time. They're not giving us a hard time. They're actually having a hard time. And when we see where these behaviors originate from, then we respond with compassion rather than go to your room. I can't stand you. It's come close, come sit with me. Let's just, slow it down. Kristen, sounds like adoption was part of your history. Let's talk about that.
That's correct. My grandpa grew up in the foster care system in the late 20s and early 30s. My grandma was adopted by a family member after her mom passed away. And so, that was just a part of the storyline. Those are the stories that we heard growing up. Not a lot of details, just a little hints here and there. Don't ask grandpa about that. That was really hard. Don't ask what happened to him there. So just little bits and pieces, or finding out that he didn't know his siblings at 70 years old. He was meeting some of them for the first time, things like that really stuck out. And then also my youngest brother was adopted as well. And so those are, just the little bits and pieces through my storyline as a child that, to me, made foster care and adoption seem like a natural next step. If I have the capability, then why wouldn't I? I think really kind of seeing the other side of it, seeing how difficult that was for my grandparents, just kind of hearing the struggle through identity, the struggle through some of the abusive experiences that they had, whether that was within the foster care system or in my biological family. So, some of that came with some knowledge, and then some of that came with some naivety on my part. Just, I'm a pretty nice person. So like, if I would have been there, I probably would have been a great parent for my grandpa. And when you really get into the meat of those stories, my grandpa was a handful. Particularly my grandpa. I haven't heard a lot of stories about my grandma, but she was kind of a firecracker too. So I'm not sure how much fun it was to raise her either. But, for my grandpa, hearing some of those stories later after becoming a parent, I can identify where the trauma was playing a role in his behavior as well.
Now with your lived experience, now you've got those lenses that you can look back and go, oh, I think I can understand a bit more of what was happening behind the scenes.
That's
so
right.
It sounds like you all came into this with Mike with some caution and Kristen with you some optimism and probably like me, love is going to fix everything. I have such a big heart and I am a pretty nice person. And I think I could be a mother to a kid who needs a mother. And so love will fix everything. So how has that worked out for you all? Did love fix everything?
Did not.
No.
Thanks for asking.
No. We learned pretty quick that was, it's interesting that you bring that up because there is an organization near where we live. I won't say the name of the organization, but they routinely, I have seen over the years, like they'll place like little advertisement banners out in front of their buildings, which is all well and good, and they're all usually really great. They're really inspiring. But there was one several years ago. I haven't seen it since, but it was a banner that said love, and then underneath it is all you need to be a foster parent. And I'm like, And I actually wrote a blog post, which I don't even think you can access anymore because we've done a lot of overhaul on our blog. But I wrote a blog post basically saying, like, it's kind of a dangerous path to travel. That can really set people up for failure because we do get into this journey with a heart, with a loving heart, which is good. It's important. And this journey does teach us how deep our heart is. Like, some people will ask, like, well, will I have the capacity to love? It's never a question of heart capacity. It's a question of willingness, right? It's a question of, will you choose to love? It's a choice, right? But we can't be naive to think that our love standing alone. Yes, we love our children, but we also need resources. We also need valuable tools that we can partner with our love and with our compassion and with our consistency to adequately care for this child. Yes, love leads the way in all situations, right? Always, it has to, but it cannot walk alone without valuable resources, community, support. That's what we learned really quickly. I would say after the first 2 years, because the first 2 years of our journey, it was total easy street. We won't lie to you. I don't think it was not difficult. Like, our firstborn child was
pretty
everything was very
typical,
normal,
I guess. Not to say like that we slept through the night right away, because nobody does with a newborn, right?
No.
But it was pretty typical. I would say that probably the first realization that my love was not going to fix things was when we first brought home our first foster placement. And that was children of our friend. And so, really in my mind, for as much caution as Mike has about things, I have zero, so I'm like, oh my gosh, we can do that. Of course, I'll be right there. I got you, so I am forever running into chaos and jumping right into it. So there I was, and brought Mike along with me. So we brought these two children home that we knew. And in our mind, we thought, yeah, because we're safe. You know us, your mom asked us to take you. Obviously it's fine. And we learned really quickly, there was no amount of me being a safe person that helped a baby to understand that I was safe and that everything was going to be okay. And there's enough food and I'm not going anywhere, and so that was our first experience. And that was 2 years into parenting. That was our first experience with a child not trusting us back. And that sounds so silly to say now, but our initial feeling was like, oh my gosh, like we've got smoke detectors and soft, cozy bed for you to sleep in and plenty of food. And we're really nice people. And all of a sudden, we had a sibling group. They were 1 and 3 at the time. And they're looking at us like, I don't trust you as far as I can throw you. I want none of you. And so that was really our first experience with understanding that our perspective was not the whole perspective, and that kids who are experiencing trauma need so much more than, what we had played up in our minds as a safe place.
Mm.
Absolutely. Of course, we have to have love. That's going to open us up to this possibility. But we need, like you all said, a paradigm shift. We need a new way of thinking. Let's talk about some of those paradigm shifts you all made.
Yeah. I mean, gosh, where to begin? I would say the biggest paradigm shift for us happened between the years of 2009 and 2011. Those were by far the most difficult years of this journey. That's where we were dealing with major behavioral issues with one of our children in particular. And it really pushed us to the edge. The issue that we had, and this is the issue that a lot of parents who come to Honestly Adoption, looking for hope and looking for answers deal with, is our response back then was a very traditional response, right? We both grew up in traditional households, right? If nobody can see me doing this, but quote, air quotes, misbehaved, our parents brought the fire and ice, man. They laid the smack down. It was discipline city, and we didn't do it again because we were neurotypical children who, we were still children developmentally. We were kids, but from a neurotypical perspective, we understood, right? We could logically connect with, yikes, I better not do that again because I don't want to be disciplined again, right? That worked for us. And I think the struggle that a lot of parents, and this was a struggle we had, is that we thought, oh, well, I'll just parent these kids like my parents parented me. But when you're talking about a child with a trauma history, a child who often functions in survival mode, as we say, basement brain, right? Reptilian brain, they're not thinking logically because they're not connected, to their prefrontal cortex. They can't think through logically. So when you understand that how the brain functions, a brain that has been impacted by trauma, how often children will resort to survival living because either A, that's how they've learned to meet their own needs, or B, because of their trauma, they're triggered easily, and the alarm system is faulty now. And when you understand that that's what's really going on, then it allows you to take a step back and say, okay, this is not a bad kid behaving badly. This is a child who is opening up a window to something bigger. They're trying to meet an unmet need. That'll change your response as a parent. From a traditional perspective, a parent will react with the, knock that off, or I don't know what's wrong with you, or not saying that any of those are appropriate responses, because I wouldn't say traditional parenting is necessarily, there's a lot of flaws in it, right? But,
right.
You have that response, but with a child who has experienced trauma, changing your response once you have the foundation of what's really going on, then you respond, kind of like you said earlier, Robbie, like, come here, let's meet the need, right? Let me work on connecting with this child long before I correct them, right? That right there, that single understanding that trauma changes the brain and dictates behaviors, often comes out in behaviors. That was the beginning of the game changer. And then from there, understanding that attachment, understanding how to respond to behaviors, all that flowed after that. But that was the single game changer, I think, for us back in those early days.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm just nodding my head like vigorously because I resonate with all of that. And I was trained as a child youth care worker to work with what we called back then emotionally and behaviorally disturbed youth. Isn't that lovely? You put all the onus and responsibility on the child. I hate that. I hated it then. Yeah. I hate it even more now. These are children. They're not in foster care because of any fault of their own. They're not in adoption scenarios because they've said, I don't want these parents. I want to be over here. Like, that's not what this is about. They've been fundamentally hurt. Yeah. Right. I mean, and maybe prenatally, like we've got the prenatal stressors that mom may be under. Maybe there's poverty. Maybe there's addiction. Maybe there's mental health. Maybe there's no prenatal care. All that goes to the developmental capacity and trajectory of this child.
Correct.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I think that's, just a shift in the way that we talk that needs to change within this community, that maybe is changing within this community. There's a big difference to saying, man, this child is out of control. I don't know what to do, which you may be feeling something like that. Or this is just a bad kid, or, children are so disobedient or disrespectful or whatever. Shifting that language to, wow, I don't really know what I'm doing. This child has needs that I don't know how to meet. I need to get educated. I wonder if there's more that I can be doing. So it's a subtle shift, but it is in that realization that, back to our first experience, no matter how nice our house was or how yummy our food was or how many pairs of clean clothes we had, those children at the time didn't wake up and say, gosh, I hope I can get a different mom and dad and a different house. That was entirely out of their control. And the lasting implication of that in that particular case, we're talking over 20 years ago now, that is still impacting everyday life for those children. And so those experiences of trauma and loss are still affecting them, and they did nothing wrong. And I know that today, we're specifically talking about drug and alcohol exposure or fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. Also, something that our children did not do to themselves. They have zero control over that. And so not only did they not expose themselves to drugs and alcohol prenatally, because that's not possible, they also then are carrying a stigma for something that they have zero control over. So, then on top of that, some need to maybe cover that over or call it something different or not tell people. And so that creates this whole cycle of, ill-equipped parenting. I can only speak to the parent part of that. And for us, stepping into that 20 years ago, I would find myself in a pediatrician's office spelling it out, literally spelling, because I had my little preschooler and I didn't want them to maybe carry something really sad with them. So I would say, like, I just want you to know that DRUGS were involved. Like, I'm just trying to hint and help and coax. And it left us with a lot of misinformation. I mean, we have to own our own poor parenting choices, but we walked away with no tools. So we were going to professionals and kind of help, to which they were saying, oh, I don't really think anything is wrong. This is just a boy. You just have never parented a boy before. Or, well, have you tried a timeout? It really seems like you're not trying to discipline. Or have you tried a bedtime routine? Or
you should reduce the sugar.
Right.
And
which incidentally we needed to reduce. But it's that response to everything. Clearly you are not a good parent. And I guess the thing about that is that we already knew it wasn't our kid's fault, if that makes sense. Pretty quickly, we started to clue in, like, don't call my kid a bad kid. That's don't call my kid a bad kid. I'm really just warning anyone who's listening. Don't say anything about kids.
I see the mama bear. I'm feeling it.
Right. I all of a sudden got kind of angry. But we were already sensing this is not my child trying to be bad. But then we'd get to the end of a long day. And the words I was saying to myself as I, shut my bedroom door and climbed into bed is, I must be a really bad mom. That cycle was not a particularly healthy way to parent. So neither was helpful. Saying that my kid just, needed violin lessons or a bedtime routine or a good old, swat on the bottom or a timeout, that wasn't particularly helpful, but also taking all the responsibility onto myself in a negative way, that was not healthy for any of us either.
Hey guys, I hope you're enjoying this interview. Listen, I wanted to jump in here real quick and basically shout out to all of my foster adoptive dads who are listening, or if you are a spouse and you are married to or connected to or friends with a foster adoptive dad, I'm also shouting out to you. Join us, dads, join us for Road Trip 2022 in the mountains of Colorado Springs this coming fall, October 3rd through the 5th through the 8th. It's going to be an amazing time. It's basically 3 days of conversation, getaway, adventure, designed by foster adoptive dads for foster adoptive dads. You can learn more at roadtripdads.com. And listen, right now, when you register for Road Trip, we are giving away some really special bonuses. In fact, we've never given away bonuses when you register for Road Trip. And right now, until September 1st, we are giving away access to Trauma Knowledge Masterclass, our premier course on understanding trauma, disrupted attachment, behavior response. We're giving free access to that, free Oasis community for a year, and a signed copy of our book, Securely Attached. You get all of it. It's a $637 value when you register for Road Trip by September 1st. That's right. September 1st is coming up in just a little over a month. You don't want to miss this exclusive bonus opportunity. We've never given away bonuses when you sign up for Road Trip, but we're doing this now, and we're giving away, some amazing bonuses. So don't miss out on your opportunity. Visit roadtripdads.com to save your spot today. And listen, if you are a spouse and your guy needs to get to the mountains of Colorado, sign him up. Sign them up. We've had lots of spouses do that over the years. And listen, there's never been any regrets for coming up the mountain and hanging out with us for a couple of days. Again, that's roadtripdads.com. And now back to the show.
I remember getting that diagnosis. I have 3 children diagnosed with fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. And the first time I sat there in that clinic and I heard the words, my blood ran cold.
Right.
Not because I was scared of FASD. That wasn't it. It just confirmed what I already knew. And it confirmed this is lifelong. This is going to be impactful. And then I still didn't know what all of that was going to mean. And as I learned and I grew and I got some coaching and I got some training, then I began to say to myself, oh, my children have a disability.
Exactly.
When you have a disability, you accommodate. Right? I have a friend who has a child who suffered from meningitis and very rapidly lost all 4 limbs. Guess what? Accommodations had to be made pretty damn fast.
Yeah.
Well, our kids are born with a brain injury and a disability that impacts their whole brain and body. So we have to accommodate.
Yeah.
It's hard to remember that though, when you're looking at this mouthy child who's having a hard time or flipping you off or whatever it is they're doing. It's hard to remember that sometimes, but it is really true. Right. And talk about that, you all, like some of the accommodations you've made, some of the adjustments you've made.
Okay. I will add to that. The child, it makes it's equally difficult when you have a child that looks normal. That's what we got a lot, like, well, it doesn't look like he has anything wrong with him. Right. And you can't explain that because you have a child who can use his words very well, who can look you in the eye, say, yes, sir, yes, ma'am. And then when you deal with those behavioral issues, people want to say, well, that just looks like a moody preteen, right? Or this looks like a angsty 15-year-old. And it's hard to explain that there's so much more going on than meets the eye, right? And there's also a lot of judgment and a lot of stigmas that come along with that. And so that's been the challenge for us. I think, Kristen, you would probably agree with this, but I think that I would say this. I know that there are people out there that they feel like, and I had a good friend several years ago who, when they received the official diagnosis for their daughter of a fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, they were crushed. And what I said was, I'm like, you need to look at this differently. This is going to provide you, this is now opening up an avenue to get the resources you need to help her as she grows older, right? And that changed his perspective because he felt like this was a death sentence, right? This is a prison sentence. I'm like, no, that's not. Not knowing is a prison sentence, right? But now and now you know how to respond. They used to say, was it like G.I. Joe back in the 80s? They'd end with, and knowing is half the battle, I just brought up G.I. Joe on your podcast.
Wow.
I love it. I didn't expect
out of the 80s,
a little trip back there.
Yeah. So,
well, I think it's interesting that you bring that up too, because there is, when we don't know, we fill in the blanks. And when our kids don't know, they fill in the blanks. And so having a diagnosis can seem daunting, but it does answer a lot of questions. Well, I use this example a lot. I wear glasses. I've always worn glasses. I can't imagine going through my childhood and experiencing everyone being able to read the chalkboard except me, and thinking, God, what is my problem? I've just got to try harder to see the chalkboard. Why am I getting such bad grades? I must be really stupid. I mean, everyone else just gets the assignment off the chalkboard and writes it on the paper and everything's fine. My parents didn't hesitate when I had my vision tested and needed glasses. They didn't stop and say, this is devastating. This is terrible. We just went to the eye doctor and got some glasses. I mean, it was kind of terrible because I've broken so many glasses in my life. I could own a mansion now, but that's neither here nor there. But
that's why we don't have a mansion.
That's why we don't have a mansion. And Mike knows it too, because
Seriously.
I will take them off. I have them off right now because of the glare, and I'll drop them on the floor and step on them. I mean, it's inevitable. The amount of glasses that I have accidentally stepped on.
Who are we kidding? We wouldn't have a mansion regardless. So
no, probably not.
Not going to happen.
But all that to say, there's, you as a parent have to shift your thinking first.
Absolutely.
So when I know I need a tool, I use a tool. I just put my glasses on every day. That's not a big deal. When I begin to explore myself, and I like to start there with parents, explore yourself. What is it about you? What makes you feel at your best? What tools do you use to navigate every day. So without shame, I would say I am a person who has high anxiety, super frustrating for everyone around me. So knowing that about myself, instead of it making me feel bad about myself, it helps me to view my actions, my behavior, the way that I process things through a different lens. So now if I start to panic, I'm up at 3 a.m. and I'm panicking, I can say, wait a second, Kristen, you know that you tend to process things with a pretty high level of anxiety. So is this really a life or death situation that you're worried about at 3 a.m.? Is there something that you can do about that? Is there anything you can do for yourself to get into a regulated state? Is it possible that, you've already controlled what you can control? Things really aren't as devastating as you thought. And maybe you could get some sleep now so that you can be at your best tomorrow. Mm-hmm. So while I kind of, I don't really want to wear a t-shirt that says I have anxiety, knowing that I do puts me in a position to understand myself better. If I denied that I had anxiety all of the time, then I would be here saying, oh my gosh, I really don't know what's wrong with me. Other people sleep all night, but I never sleep. I don't know why I'm so cranky this morning. Like everybody else had a good night's sleep, and now I'm just emotional or ticked or whatever. Knowing things about myself puts me in a position to handle those things. It's the same for our kids. And so when we know as a parent, my child has been diagnosed with an FASD, now we can start to look into what the resources are that exist. As our children go older and they say, why am I the only one getting sent to the principal's office? We say, wait, you have a diagnosis. Hang on, let's see what resources we can put in school so that you're not spending so much time in the principal's office. You are a good kid. And so that changes the way that we address this. I in no way think that I'm a bad person because I've got to put glasses on every day. That would just be silly. My kids shouldn't feel badly that we have to use some different resources to be successful at school or in the community or in our home.
I love that. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I love that idea. I use the same analogy with glasses. I've been wearing glasses since I was a kid too. I totally get that. And sometimes, when I'm teaching, I'll just take them off and go this is an accommodation I need every day. If I don't have this, I can't see you. I can't read. I can't teach. I can't drive. With this, I am now able to do the things I need to do. Right. And that's just what it is. And it doesn't matter if we need glasses, if we need a wheelchair, we need crutches, we need a ramp, we need IEPs, whatever it is we need, let's get after it. And so while I said my blood ran cold, it did, because, okay, that's real. We got to grieve. And then when I was driving around and going, okay, my kids have a disability, that empowered me. That empowered me to get after it and learn everything I could, just as I would if my kid had type 1 diabetes. Would I be crying at home and feeding them chocolate and feeding me chocolate and hoping the world would get better? No, I would change everything. Well, that's what I learned to do. And it's not easy, but I learned to do that. Yeah. And so I always say, the struggle is real and so is success.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And I'm sure you all have had this experience too. When I speak with adults who have FASD, they all tell me that, hey, I'm not defined by that. Yeah, that's my diagnosis. Yeah, that impacts how I live in the world, but it doesn't define me. I do a lot of amazing things, and that's not totally who I am as a person. They also say when they get that diagnosis, it's empowering, just like you were saying, Kristen.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So it's not a death sentence. It's not the end of the world. It's a bit more information. Now you know what you need to adjust. That's what it is.
And there are a lot of success stories.
I
mean, lots of them. We have we have older children who are achieving success, right? Advocating for themselves. They still need assistance. One of our children in particular, there are routine things that they just can't piece together, but then that child is able to advocate for themselves in really surprising ways. I just had a conversation with her this morning, and she told me about the amount of money that she saved. And I'm like, that's amazing. I was blown away, that she was able to save that amount of money. And then she was telling me about how much money she could save in addition if another week goes by. And I'm like, seriously, honey, that's amazing. That's really, really good that you have that amount. I was blown away.
Yeah, there you go. And once it clicks, right?
Yeah.
Right.
We run a parent coaching program, and we have several parents in the program right now. And I've been talking lately about the small wins. And one parent in particular who has a child who has an FASD, the other day on our call, they said, man, what a win. My child made it to 13 days in a row of school, right? 13 days in a row. Any normal family out there would be like,
Yeah,
of course. But I'm like, no, you don't understand. Like 13 days is a huge win for this family. And it's those small wins that you have to celebrate, when they come about.
we have to define what success is very differently. Mm-hmm. And also kind of without an expectation. So we adjust our expectations to our kids' capacity, to their developmental level, to their trauma history. We adapt everything so that we can set them up for success. And we coach, we guide, but then we can stand back and kind of be astonished when not only do we get these little wins, but over time, these baby steps, and we can look backward and go, oh my gosh, look how far we've come.
Yeah,
exactly. Sure.
Yeah,
absolutely. I love that.
So let's talk about the Insight Conference. We've talked about the need to shift, the need to learn. You all have this amazing conference coming up. I attended it last year and I was blown away at how excellent the content was. And I'm not just blowing smoke at you. It was amazing. I loved it. And I was so excited to register again this year. So you all tell me all about the Insight Conference.
The Insight Virtual Conference actually started in 2019 as an in-person conference, but of course, in 2020, the whole world changed and everything became virtual. And so we recognized the need to create, at the Honestly Adoption Company, as I said this earlier, we are passionate about providing parent-to-parent support and transformational education to help caregivers thrive, help caregivers succeed, and become the best caregiver possible. So the Insight Conference is an extension of that. So we created it to provide insight, to provide valuable education. And we bring in the world-leading experts, world-leading voices, people who are experts in trauma, attachment, behaviors, drug and alcohol exposure. We have adult adoptees, former foster youth who are also on the virtual stage, as we like to say it. And it's 2 days of intensive education, but also connection. That's a huge piece. Last year, it's like, you have the education, you have people like Deborah Gray, and you have Jeff Noble, and we had Dr. Ira Chasnoff last year, and the two of us were there, Lisa Qualls, all these amazing people, right? But the community, people were like begging us at the end when we were about to wrap up. They're like, could you guys just keep this going for a couple more days? Or could we just do this every week? And I'm like, that is amazing that kind of connection forged out of this. And, we have a private Facebook group set up. The coolest thing is that it's about transformation. That's what we base everything off of. And we tell all of our speakers, we handpick the speakers, right? Because we know we have a very specific mission. And one of the things we tell our speakers is, you guys, it's all about transformation. We want to move the needle for parents. We want them to leave after 2 days better than when they stepped in, more equipped than when they stepped in. So it's coming March 23rd, 24th. The registration is open right now, insightconference.org. Early bird pricing is available. I don't know when this is going to air, so early bird pricing may have expired. It expires February 21st.
Okay.
But we keep the doors. You can grab a ticket all the way until even when the conference is going on. We have like a special at the door price. Really cool thing is that we create for every virtual conference we do, and this is one of two. This is the big one. We create a virtual lobby. So picture it like when you attend a conference, you have the lobby with all the tables and everything. We create something similar to that, except it's virtual, and it has all of the speakers' resources. Almost all of them have free resources you can download. We also provide a couple extra goodies in there, and we also connect people to our special guests who like Capable Weighted Products and Goods and Better, and people like that. Adoptionally Yours, which is an adoption card company. They're amazing. We connect you to valuable resources like that. And I will say this, I know I'm going on and on and on, but this is really important. You can get foster care training hours for attending. And then if you're a professional, you can also get continuing education units through Insight Virtual Conference. And you can do that from the comfort of your own home or office. You can put a dress shirt on and have pajama pants on the bottom. We'll never know.
You'll never
know. We'll never know. And you will never know if we have our pajama bottoms on while we're hosting.
I'm going to say, Mike, get up. I want to see.
You should ask. Yeah. Stand up. Show me. Maybe we should wear like really cool pajama pants during this just for insight. So
yeah, that'd be hilarious.
Yeah, that's the scoop. Insightconference.org. Register now. Register.
Last year I came and I was transformed. And I'm already, an educated parent, know lots about FASD, know lots about trauma, but I came away with more. And this year I got on that early bird pricing right away. So thank you so much. And I
awesome.
will spread the word too, with the podcast. Yeah. I will hype it up too, because I think it is transformational. Mm-hmm. And I always say, and I'm sure you all do too, when you know better, you can do better.
Totally. Yeah,
absolutely.
So I love Jeff Noble. I've seen him present so many times, and he's so fun. And he does a really great job making FASD information understandable and conveying the information and encouraging. And he's got a great Facebook group and training and stuff. He does too. So I enjoyed Jeff. I enjoyed seeing your two kids. That was amazing. Hearing about their experience. That was amazing. And the other one, and I'm going to forget her name.
Is it Lehia?
Lehia.
Oh,
yes,
yeah.
Lehia. Yeah. And she talked about the racial component that comes into adoption when you adopt transracially. That's a thing in my family too. And I'd kind of put it on the back burner. But I'm like, no, mom, you got to put that on the front burner. You got to put that on the front burner of what's going on. I have a daughter who's Indigenous. I've got 3 kids who have mixed race. And so Lahia's words were really impactful to me. Can you guys talk about that a little bit? Talk about how having adopted transracially, or how that experience has been for your children. Maybe you have Black children who are in your home and they've got 2 white parents. That's not easy for kids. Let's talk about that.
So obviously we can't speak from their perspective. So what I can say to white adoptive parents is that racism is a real thing. And it is really still happening as we're recording this in 2022, that in both the United States and Canada, we are built on racist societies, on white supremacy, on the idea that white people can come from another continent and take things away from other people. That's just a true and genuine part of our history. And that's really not up for debate. It really is what happened. So when that's how your country's built, having not addressed that for hundreds and hundreds of years, or kind of glossing over it, or maybe telling some nice stories about, people getting along and sharing, right? We all get along. That's simply not true. And so what I can say as a parent is that you need to get educated. We need to get educated, understand our history, understand the way that impacts how our children are viewed in the neighborhood, in a shopping mall, in their own school. You need to know that, because you may, I don't want to say may, you will be on the front lines of that. You may have a child that has a disability and also is, Black or Indigenous. You need to know that the people who are working with those children may have also carried with them an assumption or a stereotype, an idea of what your child is like before they even address the disability. And so you may see a difference in special education services, in attitudes of grace. And so you're going to need to be right there to call that what it is. Was my child the only one involved in the fight in the locker room today, or is my child the one that stuck out to you? You're going to need to be bold. You need to be the advocate. You need to be working within your society to change the way that things are happening. You need to show up at the board meetings, at your PTA. You need to show up at the IEP meetings with the information that you need. You also need to know how to care for your child's hair, your child's skin, how your child will be perceived within their own community. Do they know? Have they watched the same television shows that people in their same race culture may have watched? Just recently, our 21-year-old, she said it so nicely. And I was like, it's really okay if you're mad at us about that. She went to Christmas with her boyfriend, who is also Black. And she said, there are just the times where everyone says, yeah, you remember that episode of such and such a show. And it's the assumption that everyone's seen it, but we didn't watch it. And the truth is, I had to watch that with her, but I didn't know. And not knowing is not an excuse anymore. So if you are a transracial adoptive parent of any kind, you need to get yourself educated, get your child connected with people in their own culture. They need to be able to know how to walk into a barbershop or a salon. They need to know how to choose clothing that is a source of pride within their culture. They need to know how to walk into school and talk to all races of people. They need to see teachers that mirror themselves. They need to see television shows, movies. The books on your bookshelf should be by not white people. And so, those are the things that we've learned over the last 20 years, and we're learning every day. We get things wrong a lot. That would be another, 10 hours of content that Mike and I could say, hey, by the way, parents, don't screw up the way we did with this, that, or the other thing. Again, I can't speak for my children, but I would say that our children have come to us and said, it would have been so much better if I would have known this before I walked out into a college dorm, or a high school. When our kids were really starting to fit in, they looked like they fit in. They still carried with them a whole lot of white culture, and they were at a disadvantage.
Wow, mic drop. That's so important to say that. The other thing to, I think, acknowledge, we have to make space at home at the dinner table to talk about these things. Because when we do go out to eat with our family, or we do go to church, or we do go to the shopping mall, everybody's looking to figure out how exactly do these white parents fit with these, not white children. Our family story is on display for everybody. Now, as parents, we chose this. So maybe we can walk in some pride and confidence in that. But our children didn't choose this. And they're on display, and they're being examined all the time. They never get to be incognito.
Yes.
That's correct. Yeah.
And we can forget that because white privilege, we can forget a whole hell of a lot of stuff with white privilege, but our kids don't benefit from that. And we need to acknowledge that for them and even talk about those things, talk about those hard feelings.
Yeah. I think there's, there's a phrase that Mike uses a lot called widening the circle. And we need to be doing that as parents, period. Especially as foster and adoptive parents. Our children need to have other people in their life who experience the foster care system. They need to have other people in their life who were adopted. And that extends to all those things. Our kids need a teacher,
or a coach. Yeah.
A neighbor. And we need to be actively looking for that. I know that I mentioned earlier that I have a lot of anxiety. So, letting my children then, join the dance team without me standing there, because I was afraid someone was going to hurt them. I'm like, well, I'll just hang out here in the stands. And finally my daughter's like, Mom, I am 16. You are white. No one else here has white parents. They all know you belong to me. Get out of the stands, go home, pick me up at the end of, please stop embarrassing me. We need to start helping them explore that, making the opportunity. You still need to drive. You need to do the driving. You need to pay the form fee for the step team. You're still providing a lot there, but then you need to choose those things and then say, I trust you. Have fun, honey. I'll be here at the end. I can't wait to hear all about Black Student Union. At first, when my kids joined Black Student Union, I was like, what can I do? Can I bring some cookies? They're like, no,
do not. Stay away.
White ladies, settle down.
Right. You do not need to do that. And I mean, I joke a little, but the truth is like, I want to support them. And part of that support is helping them get to the places where their circle widens, where they have other adults speaking into their lives. They have other connections with other people. They can talk about us without us hearing. All of that is fine. And we need to walk into that with confidence. We need to say, like, literally, I cannot wait to hear what you did at Black Student Union today. I can't wait to hear how your step routine went. You can't stop me from cheering in the stand. So I won't attend the practice, but like, can we talk through, do you care if mommy like jumps up and down and screams your name or like,
yes,
well,
and
need me to lay low?
Part of the problem is if you say mommy, that's the other thing too.
That's the other part.
They don't want you to say mommy.
Whatever.
But it's super fun. It's fun on our end to say things like mommy and daddy. They're like, oh my gosh.
Oh my gosh. Do not, I will pretend I don't know you. But the truth is like, look, I've got your back no matter what that is. And if you need me to circle the block until your after school club is over, I've got you. If you need me to volunteer for a field trip and then pretend that you don't know me, my heart is going to break. It's fine. I'll go out with my friends later and cry about it, but I've got your back no matter what. I truly am confident enough to handle you exploring your biological family, your culture of origin, your race, your community. I am confident enough to handle whatever it is you need to find out about your identity.
And when you are in that place of confidence that enables our kids, we're not going to lose them.
No.
And that's what we're afraid of sometimes as adoptive parents. First of all, we come in that love's going to erase everything, including what? Culture?
Right.
Original family? Like, what are we talking about? Our children are grafted into two trees. They have a biological tree and they have our adopted tree. Exactly. And who are we to stand in the way of them knowing their mother, their father, their brothers, their sisters, their grandparents? Who are we to stand in the way of that?
Absolutely.
Thank you all so much for your time. This has been such a great conversation. This is really great. I'm looking forward to the Insight Conference. I can't wait to see all the speakers and just learn even more and continue on my transformational journey. I really appreciate that.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us on. We really enjoyed this time with you.
Awesome. Great. Thank you, guys. Take good care.
Thank you for listening to the Honestly Adoption Podcast, a resource courtesy of the Honestly Adoption Company. To learn more about us, visit www.honestlyadoption.com.